Welcome to part 2 of working on the Beetlejuice Netherworld waiting room. Last week I worked on the flooring and I built the walls. This week I'm going to be painting the walls. I'm going to be furnishing Miss Argentina's office, and that's going to include some filing cabinets and a lot of paper, and hopefully just get the entire room all in one piece. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh, my shirt? You want to know about my shirt? Well, I have merch coming. Ta-da! I've never had a t-shirt design before. I've thought about it for a while, but I am so excited to announce that at the beginning of May, this shirt will go on sale. It says, "Not to brag, but my vacation home is 1/12 scale." So, I'll give you a little bit more information about the shirt at the end of this video, but I want to go ahead and get started on the project. Here's a quick glance at what I got completed in the last video. I built these walls and made sure that they fit in the space. Before I can paint them or permanently attach them, I do need to work on the office space that's behind the wall that has the window. This is going to be Miss Argentina's work area, and I cannot close it up until I have the interior finished. In the movie, you can see that she has several filing cabinets behind her. There's also some other people working back there, but for my purposes, I'm just going to fill it up with filing cabinets and papers. In my mind, that was a better option than trying to print off a picture and glue it back there. I think this will come off a little bit more realistic. I'm starting by creating a filing cabinet. I decided to make a laser cut file because I know I'm going to need several of these, not only for this space, but also when I get to Juno's office. I may also be putting one in Charles' office in the upper part of the house. I hope to make this a future kit for my store. If you want to make one for yourself, I basically just measured a regular filing cabinet and cut the rectangles out that fit the size. As you can see, I did not do a perfect job with my file because I had gaps at the top and the bottom of the filing cabinet. I also made a pretty simple drawer. I'm not going to make all 4 drawers. I'm going to make one drawer that is operational, and the other drawers are just going to be fake. To fix my mistake with the wrong size top and bottom of the cabinet, I'm just going to take some cardstock and glue it onto the top and the bottom. Once it's dry, I can use my craft knife to cut through the cardstock and no one will be able to tell that I even made a mistake. I will, of course, fix this problem before it's a kit in my store. Inserting the drawer, it works somewhat okay. It was getting stuck a little bit, but that's okay because I plan to glue the drawers in place once everything is attached. Here you can see the fake doors. I made sure to insert the drawer first so that I could make sure that the other drawers looked like they were in the right place and there was room for it in case the drawer needed to shut. To cover up the edges of the cardstock that I added, I'm adding a little tiny sliver of cardstock around the upper edge. I think it also gives the appearance that sheet metal has been folded over the top. Now that that's complete, I can go ahead and do my base coat of paint. I'm going to do this with the drawer removed so I can get to all the areas I need to. In the movie, it does look like the filing cabinets in the back are blue, so that's why I'm going with blue. I'm covering it with a clear gloss coat, and that gives it that metallic shine that I need. Now the drawer sticks even more, but as I said, that's okay for this build. It still doesn't quite look like a filing cabinet. It definitely needs handles and these little nameplates. The handles are just thin rectangles of cardstock that I bent in shape. It's 2 layers with glue in between, and then the nameplates are these little rectangles that I'm painting silver. In order to make these dingy looking pieces of paper that are going in the nameplates, I used some watercolor paint on top of some paper and I'm gluing the silver painted pieces on top. Then I can carefully cut them out and glue them to the filing cabinet. I'm gluing the silver painted handle underneath, and now I have what looks like a detailed filing cabinet with not too many steps. In a recent live stream, I aged this filing cabinet with some oil paint washes, and those were really fun to work with. So in the next few clips, you will see that it looks a lot more aged than it does here. I'm showing you here that it does not fit very well in Miss Argentina's office. So what I'm going to have to do is make a change to my filing cabinet. While it's in scale with the correct depth, I need to create an optical illusion to make it look like the filing cabinets go back further in this project than they actually do. That way I can get a few more in the space and still have room for Miss Argentina. They also need to be a little bit taller. So now I'm going to cut these down to about 1/4 of the depth. Here you can see the aging that I did with the oil paint washes. From the front they look the same, but they are much more shallow and I can fit several more into the office space. So now I'm going to play around with how they look. This is very much a back and forth game between putting the filing cabinets in the space, adding the wall, and going back and forth to see what looks right. I also realized I didn't have enough filing cabinets to fill up the entire space and I was sick of making them. I didn't want to make any more, so I've decided to add a door back there, which will make sense that, there has to be a way for her to get out of the space. It won't be a very well seen door, but I do want to make sure if anyone gets really curious and is looking around inside the spaces that there are pieces that make sense for an office setting. So now I can add the cabinets back in next to the door, and as you can see they are still a little bit short. So I'm going to be using pieces of foam board to give them a little bit more height, a little bit more variation when you look through the window. I just kept adding one piece of foam board at a time, gluing it in place, and then checking it with my filing cabinet until I was happy with the height that I was achieving. I added 2 filing cabinets on top of each other near the door. I figured this would block any view that the door was flat on the wall and the filing cabinet was also flat on the wall. What I'm going for is I want it to look as though there's probably more space behind the filing cabinets. This final filing cabinet on the very end, I'm trying to get enough height and I need some depth so that I can turn it slightly at the very end. So I'm going to need to build a little platform out of foam board. I was just using this side table as a measurement on how tall I wanted it to be. But now that I have all of my supports in place, I can start painting the wall and the supports. In case they are glimpsed, they look like they're part of the scene. This is a mixture of gray paint, sand, and Elmer's glue, which is going to give me the bumpy, rocky texture that's supposed to be all throughout the waiting room. I have been so excited to get to this point of painting because I feel like just one coat of paint can really start to bring a vision to life or a look of a room to life, and I think adding these really sandy, bumpy walls is just what this space needed. It looks so much more like a Beetlejuice set with just this addition, especially against the black and white checkered floors. Now to speed everything up, I'm going to add a little fan within this space. I will tell you, these fans are super handy to have just to speed things up a little bit. And now that the wall is painted, I can add in my filing cabinets finally. They are going to be permanently glued into place, so I don't have to worry about them falling over anymore. They are a little bit front heavy. In the last video, I think Stormy was sleeping probably the entire time I was working on everything, and you were missed. I got several comments about how they miss seeing Stormy. So here she is. She was in her favorite new spot, which is on the windowsill. And she just stares at the neighbors all day. Yeah. So many people working on lawns. She's got like entertainment all day, which means she's not in here. She doesn't want to hang out with me. I'm too boring. The next step I need to do to complete the filing cabinet illusion is to create a ton of paper stacks on top of the filing cabinet. This is going to hide the fact that they are so shallow. And I realized I never cleaned out my paint water, so all the sand that was in that paint for the wall is now in my watercolor painting, which was fine because this wasn't supposed to be anything detailed. I'm going to be cutting long strips once the paint has dry, so I have these yellowed little bits of paper, and these are going to be glued together to make my paper stacks. I'm also going to be using a bit of cardboard because it's going to take forever to stack up all this paper, and I'm going to try and cheat a little bit by adding some extra thickness with the cardboard. To begin, I'm laying out how wide I want my paper stack to be. It has to go across the entire top of my filing cabinet. Once I have the correct thickness, which I don't have here, it's a little bit too, it's not wide enough, I guess. I will figure that out eventually. But I am adding my cardboard on top, and then I'm going to carefully fold the next layer of paper over the sides of the cardboard so that it is hidden once the top paper is put on. I'm going to keep doing that, adding a few more pieces of just plain paper, and then I'll add another piece of cardboard. I'll add paper on top of that, and then fold the edges over the cardboard to hide it. This is going to make my paper stack up much faster, and I'm still going to get that realistic look. There's still a few places where I can see the cardboard peeping through, but I will worry about that once the stack is complete. Here you can see that the stack isn't quite wide enough, so I do end up widening it, as you can see here, and now it's the correct width to cover the entire filing cabinet. You could see the cardboard at the back, but once you look at the front, it is much harder to see and is covered up by the stacks of paper. If you have any pieces where you can still see the cardboard, you just kind of have to go and add a little dab of glue and fold the paper down a little bit better. Now I'm gluing some individual pieces together, adding some glue on the end, and these are going to go in my open drawers. I'm also going to be taking really tiny pieces and putting them in between the paper stacks, and this is going to cover up any wall that's showing through. I do not want you to see the wall at all because it will break the illusion that there's more depth than there actually is. I'm adding a few papers in between the filing cabinets that have kind of looked like they've fallen down and gotten stuck. And then of course I have to add the wall back just to make sure that I've completely covered my bases and I have enough paper that you can't really see the wall anymore. And I'm pretty happy with this effect. I know there's kind of a blank spot over to the right, but I will be covering that up with some of the paneling that's going to go on the window. I added some light in there so you could kind of see how it might look once that space is lit up. Now it's time to do the same painting effect on these walls themselves before I put them into the space. It's going to be easier for me to paint them before I insert them, so that's what I'm going to do. It's the same mixture of paint, sand, and glue, and I decided to do a new technique to see if it would help keep the foam board from warping. I'm going to do little spots of paint here and there, let them completely dry before I do any more painting. I'm hoping if I do it this way without painting the entire thing at one time, that maybe it won't warp as much. I used the sand lid to cover my paint while everything dried, and I turned on the fan, so hopefully it would dry a lot faster. So of course your question may be, did this work? Well, kind of. I think if I had let it dry an entire day in between each set of spots, it probably would have stayed pretty flat, but because I was only letting about an hour worth of dry time between each set, it did end up warping more than I liked. So maybe I'll try it the other way in the future. I ended up painting the wood beams a gray that's a little bit lighter than the gray on the walls, and this is how everything is looking so far. These are not glued in, by the way. I'm just setting these in place to see how everything is looking. So now that I have all my walls complete, I need to create the wavy covers that are going to go on this wall and this wall. It really does give the waiting room its iconic look, so I need to make sure I get it right. For this, I have decided to use Worbla, which I played around with in a recent live stream. I think it's going to be the perfect material to create these fast and effectively. So to help me with that, I actually had a delivery this week. Let me go get it. Okay. I probably should have put this on the floor. This package is from Arteza. They sent me a few supplies to try out, and I know one of them that they sent me is going to be incredibly helpful. So I'm actually going to put this back down on the floor, so hold on. All this is like free art supplies here, my friend. Free art supplies. Here's the supply I'm going to be using today. It is a Arteza classic heat gun. This is going to help me heat up the Worbla to try and get it to wave like I want it to. I do have a heat gun that was my husband's and I was borrowing it. This one is much smaller, and because I'm working on small pieces, hopefully it will be a little bit easier for me to use and keep on my workspace while I'm working. They also sent me some glue pens. This is a package of 12 glue pens. I'm really excited to try these out. I'm always looking for exciting new glue. Like, if you're a miniaturist, you know, glue is exciting. And finally, out of this box is sticky notes. And if you know how much I love Post-its, which is a brand name, these sticky notes I'm super excited about. I'm actually going to open this now because I use sticky notes all the time when I'm painting to help me protect the walls that I'm painting, and they're easy to unstick, move around. I write notes on them. Endless possibility for sticky notes. And this one package comes with so many. My dream. I have sticky notes for the rest of my life. It has to be just the right amount of stickiness where it stays in place, but it's easy to remove. That's a nice amount of stickiness. Last thing that they sent me is something that I need, something that I use daily. But I have not bought a new one of these for myself in 5 or 6 years. You've kind of seen on camera this interesting looking one, and they do last quite a long time, but I'm pretty rough on my mats and they do get messed up pretty quickly. Actually, the one that's underneath this Beetlejuice base on my desk, the numbers have started rubbing off and I can't even really use it to measure anymore. So Arteza sent me this gorgeous, oh, it's very heavy duty, gorgeous mat. It's 24 inches by 36 inches. I think it's bigger than the mat that I have on the desk right now. So it doesn't stand up to high temperature. So no ironing on here. I will not be doing my Worbla work on top of this mat. It's this really nice light gray on this side and a really nice dark gray on this side. And so it'll be really good for filming for me personally, because if I use something that's too light or too dark, it really messes with my camera. So this gray color is perfect for me. I'm so excited to use this. As soon as I'm done with the Beetlejuice base, this is going to come off the table and this giant beautiful mat is going to go on the table. Thank you so much to Arteza for sending me these 4 items. They did send them to me for free to review. So far, I'm super happy with what I'm seeing. I will have links and a discount code in the description box below if you want to check the items out for yourself. And of course, before I could move on, I just had to fold up all this paper and hopefully save it for a future project. Now I'm going to show a technique that I learned from Darkest Raven Designs. I need to expose the corrugation on the inside of this cardboard. Usually I just rip at it and wish for the best, but she showed us that we could use water to wet the top piece of the cardboard, and then it would loosen the glue so that you could easily peel away the top piece. This worked really, really well. I have never had this clean of a piece of cardboard before. And then once the top layer is removed, you can just use more water to kind of lay down any of those frizzy bits of cardboard that are left over. I also made sure just to remove any of the larger chunks. Thank you, Chantel, for sharing this technique. It's definitely helped me today. Now it's time to test out that heat gun from Arteza. I immediately noticed how much lighter this machine was than the other heat gun I had been using. Here you can see the difference in the size between the one I was using and the new Arteza one that I'm excited to try out. I'm very happy that it has a stand. I don't know if it's due to the cord being wound, but I did have a few times where it was not staying on its stand very well. It was kind of rocking back and forth, but once it had kind of unwound a bit, I felt like it was sitting flatter on my desk. What I'm using here is a piece of Worbla, just a scrap piece, to try out my idea. What I want to do is make these curved panels that you see in the movie, and the Worbla is pretty much already the perfect color and texture. I'm using a dowel to push the warmed up Worbla into the crevices of the cardboard. If you're wanting to know a lot more about what Worbla is and what it's commonly used for, I will put a link to another video I did on this material in the description box below. However, for this project, I think it's working really well. I wanted to do an experiment to see if it would have light shine through it a little bit better if I stretched the Worbla before I shaped it on the cardboard. In the movie, there's definitely light that's shining through the panels, so I want to make sure I can match that effect. So here I'm doing a simple test to see if you can see light through them. The unstretched Worbla still has light going through. There's more light that's coming through the stretched Worbla. However, when I compared the strength between the two pieces, I don't think the difference between the two amounts of light was worth it not to have a stronger piece of plastic. So I've decided to go with unstretched Worbla, and there'll just be a little bit of glow that comes through the material. To begin making my panels, I'm just going to take my wall and I'm going to trace the size of the shape that I need to fill with the Worbla panels, but I'm going to make sure and cut them a little bit larger in case the panel shrinks while I'm making the wavy pattern. There was a little bit of a learning curve when it came to this process because Worbla itself has an adhesive that's mixed into it. So as soon as you heat it, it becomes sticky. So it was sticking to the cardboard and the dowel that I was using to shape it. However, once it cooled off, it became much easier to take it off of the cardboard. Once the panel had cooled down and hardened, I could test it next to the opening it was supposed to fit in, use my tin snips to cut any excess off, and once it fit perfectly into the spot, I used some hot glue to tack it in place. I got a lot more comfortable with just warming up portions of the Worbla and working on it, and then warming up another portion once I was happy with the previous portion, and on longer pieces or bigger pieces, this was a good technique to use. Here is the finished wall that Barbara and Adam walk through when they're going back to Juno's office. However, I realized I never made the door. So I'm using some wood pieces to quickly frame out a door. This door also has some of that wavy panels inside of it, so I need to make that as well. I painted this frame in a light gray to match the light gray beams that already existed, and I cut out a panel that has this little notch in it for in the future to make a door handle. I found as time went by that it was much easier to warm up the edges of the Worbla pieces before putting them into the frame. By doing this, I didn't have to make sure that they were the exact right size. They just had to be around the right size, and then I could force the Worbla into the shape that I wanted. Now that the door is finished, I decided I wanted it to be a magnet wall or a magnetized piece that I could take out. This is going to help me access the wiring that's at the back of the room if I ever need to fix something. I just built a little popsicle stick bridge, added a magnet, and then the pin nails are on the back of the door. So now this door will sit in place, and I made sure to add a few other pieces so the door didn't move too much, but it will sit in place and block the wiring that's at the back, and now I have some easy access. I used the same techniques to make the panels that go on Miss Argentina's window. I also wanted to add one more panel that had that hole cut out that you see. I just really felt like this area needed it, but it's not going to be completely accurate, and as you can see, this panel doesn't actually cover up the hole in the window, but this is just going to be aesthetic, and it's going to be glued on in the end and not really move. So we're just going to have to suspend reality here, which is basically this whole project. I started creating this panel in a very similar way as I did the others, by just heating up the Worbla and shaping it against the corrugation. I wanted to make a pretty accurate hole in this panel, so I found these cutters that I had been using for polymer clay. I heated it up with the heat gun and then pressed it onto the Worbla. I don't think I had got it quite hot enough to cut through the Worbla, so I decided to try again by warming up the Worbla itself and the circle cutter at the same time, and that seemed to cut a lot deeper, so I think that was the way to go. It still did not cut all the way through, but it cut enough that it made it very easy for me to separate the two pieces with a craft blade and have a pretty even circle. After that was done, I went back over with the dowel rod again against the corrugation just to make sure that anything that had kind of been squished was made back into a ripple effect. In order to even out the edges of my circle where they had been a little bit rough, I warmed up an awl and then went around the edges just to make it look a little bit nicer. Once that was finished, my customized panel was ready to go into its frame. I really like how this turned out. Again, it's not perfect, it's not screen accurate, but I think it just gives that little bit of nod to the original set design. Before I put these in, I'm going to go ahead and age those panels just a little bit because I'm using a drip technique. I want to do this before I'm putting this in over my black and white checkered floor. I will most likely age things even more once the entire room is complete, but if I can do this beforehand without making a mess, that's what I'm going to do. And before the walls go in, I needed to go ahead and make holes for the wiring. The wiring is going to go through a center section in my base, so I need to create a hole that goes through to the center section where all the wiring is going to meet up. I made sure to make 2 holes because I'm going to be running 2 lines of light. One of the lines is going to go through Miss Argentina's office area into the turnstile, and the other line of lights is going to be the waiting room's main light source. I've started using something called smart LEDs. I'm still learning about it. My husband is the one who's kind of taking the lead on this, but he's promised to teach me about it as we go along, so I'm hoping eventually I can tell you what I'm doing or what we're doing, and we can all learn together. So now that the lights are in, I have the holes drilled, I can go ahead and install the walls. This is a really scary moment because I'm gluing them in, and if there's a mistake and I have to take them back out, it means I'm going to be ripping up a lot of my work. I'm using all sorts of 1, 2, 3 blocks and rulers to hold that first wall in place while it dried, and then once it's dry, I can go ahead and add the next wall. I realized because of some warping that had happened, I needed to recut the angle on one side of the wall, so I did that first before adding glue. I also had to double check the door on this wall because I didn't want to move the wall around too much to where the door didn't fit. Because there's going to be a ceiling that drops down, I was able to add some hot glue at the very top of this wall segment, and that's going to help it stay in place while the tacky glue dries. I did the same thing for this little pizza slice that helps my 2 walls connect to each other. There's a mixture of tacky glue and hot glue on that piece to help hold it in place. The tacky glue will last many years, while the hot glue holds on immediately. Now I have access to this back wiring area. That's what that little hole at the top is. It's going to let my wires out. Now I need to cover the connections between all the walls because there are quite a few decent gaps. I know you can't tell much on camera, but especially between Miss Argentina's wall and the door wall, there is quite a gap there, and I don't want there to be. So I've put some joint compound into a small bag, and I'm using it kind of like an icing piping bag. I cut off one corner and I'm squeezing it out. This is a much easier way to make sure I am getting the joint compound exactly where I want it to go. If I was trying to use a trowel or some kind of palette knife like I usually like to use, I would be making a huge mess. So this was a much easier way to do it. I'm also going to be adding some baseboards and some crown molding in areas where I think those pieces need help. Because I don't cut all of my panels perfectly, this is kind of little insurance to make sure that it looks correct once everything's done. So I added it mostly around the turnstile because that was a very complicated area, and it really helped to have those. I'm going to be trying out my Arteza sticky notes now for my painting technique. I'm putting down my cardboard to keep most of the center part of my floor safe from paint, but the real hero is going to be these sticky notes if they work well, because I'm going to be painting directly on top of them. They are going to give me that nice, clean, straight line between my baseboard and my floor. I'm using the same mixture of gray paint, sand, and Elmer's glue. I'm using it to paint all of the new pieces, and I'm putting it here and there on the old wall in case my colors are just a little bit different. I want everything to blend in. The sticky notes worked really well for this technique, and if you want to try it and reuse your sticky notes, you can just pull them off, let them dry, and use them in other places in your project. I'm really happy with how this is turning out, and here's one more little Stormy cameo for you. She was very attentive during this part of the project. Here's the project with all of the furniture in there. Of course, the next video I am going to be working on the furniture and the accessories, but I had to show you what we've done with the lights so far. With my bright studio lights, you couldn't see it, so I turned them off, and then you still couldn't see it. And then I upped the exposure, and I'm just loving how it looks. I can almost picture Adam and Barbara walking through the door.
You don't have an appointment, do you?
So that's all I have for you today. I really hope you enjoyed the project. As promised, I'll tell you a little bit more about my merch shirts that are coming. As you might be able to see, the shirt has the general shape of what started as the Addams Family house. In the very top tower, there is a BHM standing for Bentley House Minis. I drew this myself. It's my handwriting and everything on the shirt, so I'm super excited. I think it's a great way to represent my channel. It's a funny saying, and it refers to the fact that some of us use our miniatures as a little bit of an escape from the real world. And that's okay. We all need an escape sometimes. These shirts will be available in different colors at the beginning of May, and I will make sure you know all about where you can get them. Woohoo! They're super duper soft. Like, I've been wearing it a lot. I had to put it in the dryer to get the wrinkles out because, like, it's so soft like I wear it to bed. In the next Beetlejuice video, which will be the final installment of creating the waiting room, I am going to be making all of the furniture. Well, I'm going to be repainting the furniture and making all of the accessories to really bring everything to life. By doing this, I will be ready for Beetlejuice, which is when I'm going to make all of the characters, hopefully. Hopefully I can fit them all into 1 month, but we shall see. That's when I'm going to be making all of the characters, so their waiting room needs to be ready so they have a place to wait. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! Probably shouldn't have dumped them all out. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Whoa, whoa. Okay. Sorry, hold on. I'm almost there. Almost done.